In the Quran, it never actually states that Muhammad lived in Mecca, nor that Mecca was where the first revelations took place. Does the material in the Quran point to Mecca being the setting for God's revelations to Muhammad?
No, it doesn't. I mean, there is mention of a sanctuary. There is a sanctuary, for sure. But where is that sanctuary? That's, of course, we can't tell.
It's devilishly difficult to sort of extract what the context might have been from the text itself.
In Muslim tradition, the people of Mecca are pagans, worshippers of idols. But in fact, the people the Quran describes have a deep and sophisticated knowledge of the biblical tradition.
The Quran retells biblical stories and alludes to biblical stories, not just biblical, but also post-biblical developments. All this is clearly known to the audience.
It suggests that what we have is a kind of response on the part of, let us say, Muhammad, to the debates that were going on in Christian and Jewish communities, where they were debating theological issues and questions that come out of the Hebrew Bible and come out of the New Testament. And the Quran seems to be an effort to engage in the discussion. And so there's a strong connection with the late antique religious discourses that were alive throughout the Near East.
So it's obviously not a pagan world we're looking for. The people in the Quran worship a single God, but it then accuses them of praying to beings other than God. And there's something else. The people the Prophet addresses in the Quran are farmers, agriculturalists, but there was no agriculture in Mecca.
Mecca does not have an agrarian base. In Mecca, it seems to have been quite an arid valley.
If Mecca is this barren, infertile place, how is it that in the Quran, the opponents of the Prophet are described as keeping cattle and growing olives and vines?
Good question. This is one of the reasons why some scholars feel that the text of the Quran is really plugged into, say, Syria.
Because that's where vines and olives grow,
you would find
much
those
further
in
north.
Geographical Syria, right? You don't find olive trees in Mecca.
So if Mecca wasn't the starting point of Islam, what was? If you're following the clues in the Quran itself, then you're looking for a landscape inhabited by olive-growing Arabs who have a deep knowledge of the biblical tradition, but whose worship of a single God might seem to some a little shop-soiled. This is the city of Avdat, in the Negev desert. Back in the early 7th century, it was an Arab city on the very fringes of the Roman Empire. Nominally Christian, but with hints of a recently pagan past. There can be no doubt that this is a Christian place of worship. There are 2 crosses on the ceiling, but there's also something very interesting in the corner, which is a bull complete with horns, and the bull is an image that very probably is drawn from much older native Arab pagan traditions. That doesn't mean that the Christians who built this were themselves pagan, but it does mean, I think, that they are giving their monotheism, their belief in a single God, a little bit of pagan colour. And that essentially is the crime that Muhammad in the Quran seems to be accusing his opponents of. But Avdat had more than the right religious complexion. It also had agriculture and olives. In the lifetime of Muhammad, all this would have been green. It would have been agricultural fields as far as the eye can see. Archaeology leaves no doubt that there was a sophisticated irrigation system here that really did make the desert bloom. And so while that doesn't mean that this Avdat is the actual spot where the Quran was composed, it does imply, I think, that the region as a whole seems to fit the wider context of the Quran better than somewhere much further south in the arid region of Mecca. When you read through and through the Quran, what's really striking as compared, say, to the Bible, which is full of allusions to recognizable landscapes that we know, in the Quran, it's an effort to find an allusion to any landscape or natural setting that we could actually pin down. In fact, in the whole of the Quran, there's really only the one exception. Not far from Avdat, a strange hint about where the Quran might actually have come from. We are on the southernmost shores of the Dead Sea, between what is now Israel and Jordan. Lot was the nephew of Abraham, and he went to settle down in a city called Sodom. And the people of Sodom were notoriously racy. Unsurprisingly, this provoked the wrath of God. He destroyed his city, and this is said to be the remains of Sodom, where the anger of God was poured down upon it. And the Quran. So also was Lot among those sent by us. Behold, we delivered him and his adherents, all except an old woman who was among those who lagged behind. Then we destroyed the rest. Truly, you pass by their sites by day and by night. But if the people being addressed by the prophet are passing this place by day and by night, then what's it doing here? 1,000 kilometers from Mecca. In terms of someone who is looking for clues, you are very much in the situation of someone who is panning for gold. And I think that this passage is just one little fleck. I mean, there is one possibility, of course, which is that this one fragment originated in this neighborhood. Perhaps the rest came from elsewhere. But that then begs the question of where all the various component parts of the Quran are coming from. Are they necessarily to be attributed to one person living at one time? Again, when you start asking that question, it's very hard to know how far to push it.
It's from the West that this kind of history came up. That is, reason is the ultimate decider and judge of the truth. But what I'm saying is that those are not going to really give you the reason that is logically satisfying.
Where do you think the likeliest place of its origin?
Well, that I don't know. That I don't know. I don't think I should speculate on that.
Okay, all right. Okay. My greatest fear is that I'm completely wrong. I do sometimes wake up in the middle of the night and think I've got it completely wrong.
Once the world is reduced to a mechanical world, then all other levels of reality lose their status as being real. And they're relegated to the realm of so-called superstition. And what is not seen is considered not to exist.